Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, Streetsville Secondary School North. Go Tigers.
And good morning. Good morning, Port Credit Secondary School North. Go Warriors. Mr. Turner, the
McMaster. McMaster Marauders.
Yes.
Alma mater for me.
Excellent.
Any of your grade 12s who are applying to MAC?
They'll
Terrific school.
yeah, absolutely.
It's like 1,000 times better than Guelph. Sorry, guys.
I wore my Guelph sweatshirt the other day. Go Griffins. Anyway, I think that's also my sweater, but that's all right.
Well, I gave it to you.
All right, ladies and Mr. Turner, the hat.
You know what? It's a little chilly, a little bit windy, and so the hat. But the ear flaps also maybe protect me from listening to. Well,
me?
What? No. It's like an angel singing.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, what we thought we'd do today, if technology helps us out here, is that we actually thought we'd go through the quotations from chapters 4, 5, and 6. We had given you about 32 of them. We thought we'll try to go through them as quickly as we can. You're going to notice some overlap with some of the themes. Hopefully you noticed that even when you were looking through the quotations. For those of you who did it, you did a good job. Thank you.
Wake, Duncan, with thy knocking!
Wrong work,
I
Mr.
would
Turner.
thou couldst.
Okay, Macbeth. We're on Gatsby. Gatsby!
Oh. No
Which
problem,
Gatsby?
old sport.
Excellent. All right. So, shall we get going?
Get her at her.
Most of
Let's
them are in
pitter-patter,
order.
Let's get at her.
Most of them are in order, with the exception of number 1. The first one comes a little bit out of order, but then he kissed her. At his lips' touch, she blossomed for him like a flower, and the incarnation was complete. This is from when Jordan is telling Nick about the whole way that Gatsby and Daisy met. And what do you take from that quotation?
Well, I mean, I obviously we've got that flower imagery that runs through everything, and and as she's blossoming, she's turning into a different person. It's like almost like a metamorphosis, and so as a consequence, it really shows, I think, the change and the rebirth of that love that was there. You're gonna disagree on that one. You're free to disagree.
Yeah, I am. I'm never entirely sure that Daisy truly loves Gatsby. I don't think Daisy has the ability to love anyone.
No, she's vapid. There's
Right.
nothing there.
But I think it's more. I think the kiss is in that incarnation. I think is really Gatsby. It's having an impact on him.
Sure.
He has been totally. Daisy has absorbed him. That's not the way I'm looking at it, but
She's like
This is-
paper towel.
This has created this whole world for Gatsby. This one kiss is what she represents.
Representing. Okay, let's move on to the next one.
I'm trying.
Ugh.
I know. Draw your pattern. I just want it to stay unlocked. Anyway, all right. Next one. Oh, I love this one. I didn't want you to think I was just some nobody. And Gatsby says this to Nick as they're driving into the city for lunch. He's giving him all these, I don't know if you remember, but he's giving him all these proofs of who he is, right? He says he was from a very wealthy family in the Midwest.
War hero from Montenegro.
Montenegro gave him an award, right?
Where is that?
Montenegro? I don't actually know. So you're putting me on the spot there. Montenegro. Europe. Eastern Europe. Yeah.
Sure.
Albania and Montenegro. Yeah. Is that right?
I think so.
All right.
I'll let one of the kids look it up later.
For sure.
They can correct us.
But here's the important.
Maybe do a dislike on our video. Somebody,
People have been-
one person.
Four people disliked our video on YouTube.
I don't care.
Anyway, let's get him back. And he says he's trying to prove. He says, "Where were you from in the Midwest?" And he says San Francisco, which of course makes you laugh, really. But he tells about his Oxford days. He talks about his picture, right? He says the Earl of Doncaster. I think this is one of the quotations as well. You know, the man on my left is the Earl of Doncaster. He needs to prove to Nick that he is somebody.
Big question that came up with me was old money versus new money, and
Right.
where's that new money coming from? And so Gatsby represents new money.
Absolutely.
Okay, and we don't know. Well, we're starting to get to understand where that new money is coming from, right? But
Alcohol, bonds, you name it.
he's into it.
He's
right?
a criminal.
Yeah, and so he's new money. The Buchanans are old money, and so as a consequence, he's constantly trying to show people that he is worthy, that he's potentially old money, the ivy on the house,
Yep.
the books, and now
Oxford.
Oxford, and now the name dropping,
Yeah.
so
Yeah, absolutely. And this becomes very important in chapter 7 during the confrontation in the hotel. You've all finished the novel now. So in the hotel,
all of them.
they should have,
I don't know.
Mr. Tom Buchanan says, I'm not going to let Mr. Nobody from nowhere come in and cause a row and take away my wife. Right? And so you've got this parallel between Gatsby worried that he's a nobody and Tom acknowledging that he's a nobody. And that destroys Gatsby.
You're
Okay.
nobody till somebody
There has to be a way that this would
loves you.
stay open. All right. Okay, good. The city scene from the Queensboro Bridge is always the city scene for the first time, in its first wild promise of all the mystery and the beauty in the world. All right. Queensboro Bridge, of course, going into Manhattan from Queens. Any thoughts of what he's saying there?
Well, I mean, it's just talking about the magic of seeing the city. Even if you've been there before, it's the magic of seeing it for the first time. Any of you who've ever been to New York, you recognize that it's just so, the energy in there is crazy, and so when you get there, it feels like you're going to a brand new place every time, because it's so big and busy and there's so many things going on. So I think maybe that's
Yeah, and just to cite Maureen Corrigan, again a professor who's written a great deal on Gatsby, she talks about the importance of water. Remember, we talked about this. We talked about the wake of Gatsby. We talked about the fact that East Egg and West Egg are separated by water. And this is, again, this idea of moving from one place to another, of moving to that new place. And of course, we have to understand that what ultimately happens, right, is that huge fight in chapter 7. And that is in Manhattan. That is on the other side of the water. And so we're going to talk a little bit more about water in one of the other quotations, but I think that's important as well.
saw
is
the
that bridge.
first fish of the season.
You did
Yeah.
you? Excellent.
Little bass.
Little
right off
bass.
the end of the dock.
Hello, Bass. All right. Perfect. Okay, so then the Valley of Ashes opened out on both sides of us, and I had a glimpse of Mrs. Wilson straining at the garage pump with panting vitality as we went by.
There's that. She's reaching out, not dissimilar to Gatsby, reaching out to that green light at the end of the dock. It's that thing that is just out of grasp.
Yeah. She wants desperately to be in that other that other world. Right?
Gatsby moving from new money to trying to be looking at old money. We have Myrtle moving from Valley of Ashes, but trying to get into that kind of middle ground.
One of the things that we didn't talk about in the last video, and a couple of students of mine mentioned it, was the violence that Tom shows to Myrtle in chapter 2. Right?
Bust your nose.
A couple of people questioned, why does he react so badly to her saying Daisy, Daisy, Daisy? What's the purpose of that? I've always interpreted that as she is daring to step into his world.
That's right.
Right?
Yeah.
She's daring. There's the line Catherine, Myrtle's sister, says, they both can't stand the people they're married to, but Tom can't divorce his wife because they're Catholic. No, they're not, and trust me, there's no divorce happening anyway. That's never going to happen.
The implication being that if he could divorce her, then
He
he would
would.
be with Myrtle. But there's no way.
That's
That's
not
never
going to
going to happen. No way.
Right. And so we do see that violence. Remember in chapter
You're not going
1,
to divorce me, are you?
there was the black and blue finger that Daisy had. And so we know that Tom is violent in that way. And so this is just a reiteration of it. But Myrtle dares to mention Daisy's name, and that is not acceptable. And so I just wanted to clarify that as well.
Her nose.
What's that?
Busts her nose.
Oh, it does, totally,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so I think that the straining at the gas pump, I think that vitality that Myrtle has is so important because it's in contrast, of course, to George. It's in contrast to the Valley of Ashes. Nobody is living in the Valley of Ashes. They're all dead, right?
That's right.
I think at one point Tom says, he's too stupid to know he's alive.
That's right.
Right? So that becomes important.
You
This
can
one,
fool me,
but you can't fool
but you
God.
can't fool God.
Imagine us at a dinner
Quotation.
table. Yeah. I see you're looking at my cuff buttons. I hadn't been looking at them, but I did now. They were composed of oddly familiar pieces of ivory, finest specimens of human molars, he informed me.
Love that.
Oh, Wolfsheim.
Love that.
They
Meyer,
changed it in the movie. They've got it as a
Wolfsheim,
tie pin.
that's right.
But yeah, Meyer Wolfsheim.
Okay, there's no question that the implication here is that the name denotes that he's Jewish. We have
Yep.
thousands of years of
Discrimination.
against the Jews, and often associated with criminal behavior.
For sure.
Okay, bad money.
Yeah.
Merchant of Venice, we have Shylock, who is the moneylender of the Jew, right?
Oh, absolutely. And when you look at the crime in the 20s, you had several very famous people who were Jewish, and so they were just associated as a Jewish thug, and right, and that's sort of how Nick is portraying Wolfsheim. But I think we also look at the idea of a wolf, right?
And wolf, yeah. And so also we have this idea that Gatsby suggests to Nick that Wolfsheim was responsible for fixing the World Series.
Right.
Chicago
1919?
Black Sox, they call
That's
them,
right.
right? They call them the Black Sox because they're normally the White Sox, but because they were all so bad criminals,
Yep.
in fixing the World Series, throwing it so that the bettors could win their money.
Mm-hmm.
We get this, and of course the wolf is predatory, right? And so it's constantly on the lookout for, and the fact that he's got human molars for cufflinks.
Right.
Okay, these are the things that pin the cuff of a shirt together, and he's got human molars. So where did those things come from? Well, they came from a human head. Okay, which indicates significant criminal behavior.
For sure.
I have about.
You do not have human molars
one
as
pair.
cufflinks. No, you do not. I don't even think you have cufflinks.
I
Period.
once killed a man in Reno.
You didn't.
No, I didn't. I've never even.
You've never been to Reno. You did get a ticket in Vegas, though. Yeah. Anyway.
That was not my fault.
Following too closely. Anyway, the officer looked at Daisy while she was speaking, in a way that every young girl wants to be looked at sometime. And because it seemed romantic to me, I have remembered the incident ever since. This is Jordan telling Nick this, and it's quite lovely. You know, this idea of romantic love, etc. I still don't know if I can believe it, but Daisy was 17. Daisy, you have to understand, guys. Daisy was fabulously wealthy. She has never been somebody who was low in the stratus of society. She has always been wealthy, right? This officer comes in, and of course officers all wear uniforms, so you don't have a differentiation. You don't know if somebody's rich or somebody's poor. They're all just wearing their uniforms. And so she falls in love. This man adores her, and she falls in love with him. But as soon as he's gone, she marries Tom.
That's right.
See you later.
Yeah,
Right?
and we have to understand that not dissimilar to an arranged marriage, we would have Tom and Daisy. They would be traveling in the same circles,
Right.
socially and also economically in the hierarchy. And generally speaking, if you are rich, you marry somebody rich and you have rich babies. And if you're middle class, you marry somebody middle class, and we have middle class babies.
Right.
And if we're poor, then we more than likely, or working class, not the same. But you're likely going to stay within that station. It's very difficult in North American society to actually climb, and this is the interesting thing about Gatsby is that he's trying. He's trying to climb. That's the woodpecker up on. I don't know if you guys could hear that. A woodpecker right behind you there.
But so was Fitzgerald.
Serious.
Remember?
Oh,
Going
yeah.
back to his biography, he was desperately trying. Again, Maureen Corrigan talks about the fact that he was a laughingstock of Princeton. He was never accepted as part of the in crowd. And so he tried to
Like
climb
kind of like
as
me
well.
at high school.
Yeah. All right. He came alive to me, delivered suddenly from the womb of his purposeless splendor.
I don't know about that. That's yours. All
Is
you.
it all mine?
All you.
You know what? I think this is the idea of Gatsby, again, being reborn. This is Nick admiring everything about him. We've talked about him being
He's
gorgeous,
gorgeous.
the romantic readiness, exactly. And so I want you to consider, there's a lot of critics that argue that Gatsby is a Christ figure. And there's several references to that. Now, we haven't gotten into Lear yet, but we're going to talk about Cordelia as a Christ figure. You're going to see this over and over and over again. For those of you interested in it, there's a fabulous chapter in Foster's work, How to Read Literature Like a Professor, on the Christ figure, and I believe the chapter is called "She's a Christ Figure."
And if I
very, very
remember
good.
correctly, at the end when he's shot, right, he is in the pool, water, okay, submerged, and I believe that his body is in such a way he's on his front, and at least
Well,
in the movie,
in the film, they have
and
him
they have
exactly.
him almost crucified.
Yeah, yeah. And one of the quotations ties in with that water as well. So give me a second.
Sure, but that was all you, so I shouldn't be talking.
Yeah,
Carry on.
no, and as I said, I think it's that he comes alive to Nick, right? But it comes from the womb, and we'll talk about this incarnation. We'll talk about Gatsby is born of himself, right? Because he creates himself, and he's the platonic son of God. At one point, Nick talks about that. So that's a good one.
Doesn't Nick say, "Well, you can't reinvent yourself"? He says, "Well, of course you can.
You can't repeat the past.
You can't repeat the past." And
right?
and
Gatsby says, "Of course you
Look how
can."
smart you are. Wow.
I try my best. All right. Well, this would interest you.
It's my birthday today.
It is your birthday.
Doesn't
Happy birthday.
Nick says, and today's my birthday.
But it's his 30th. It's not your 30th.
I'm at 38 today.
No, you're not.
39.
Add about 15 to that there, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah.
Ouchie. Well, half of them can't.
We actually just celebrated our 20th anniversary yesterday.
Of meeting each
Of
other.
meeting each other.
Yeah,
That's
where was
right.
that?
Blind date at the Crooked Q.
Blind
For
date,
my grade
Crooked
12. You know
Q.
where that is? Nope.
Kicked your butt
You
in
did.
pool.
You did. You did. All right, let's continue. Well, this would interest you. It wouldn't take up much of your time, and you might pick up a nice bit of money. It happens to be a rather confidential sort of thing. This is Gatsby suggesting that Nick could be involved in his criminal activity. Please remember, Nick's not poor. He's a 29-year-old until the party in Chapter 7. He's a 29-year-old who's on an allowance from Dad. Dad has given him money to allow him to find himself
And
right?
test out the bond market. See if he can make his way in the bond market.
Exactly.
Just
So
dabbling.
this is early 20s, right? This is 1922, and so he's just dabbling. So please don't think that Nick is poor, but he does refuse Gatsby. He does not take part in that, but Gatsby tries to pull him in. All right. An hour later, the front door opened nervously, and Gatsby, in a white flannel suit, silver shirt, and gold-colored tie, he hurried in.
That's what I'm wearing for my birthday dinner tonight.
He was pale, and there were dark signs of sleeplessness beneath his eyes. This is when he comes to Nick's house in Chapter 5, waiting to be reunited with Daisy. One of the reasons I chose this quotation was, again, just the colors. Think about this. It's quite gaudy to have your just a white flannel suit, silver shirt, gold-colored tie. What do we associate with silver and gold?
Wealth.
Trappings of wealth,
That's
right?
correct.
And so Gatsby is showing his wealth with that suit. Most men, probably Tom, would have worn a navy suit or a black suit or a gray suit, not a white
or
flannel
maybe even
at that point.
maybe even like
at that time of the day.
nice slacks and a jacket,
Right.
As opposed to
They would have worn suits.
a suit.
Yeah,
Okay,
for
I
sure,
don't know.
for sure. Gatsby, pale as death, with his hands plunged like weights in his coat pockets, was standing in a puddle of water, glaring tragically into my eyes. Oh my gosh, my boyfriend Leo does such a good job of this. It's
I'm
awesome.
Gatsby.
Whew. Anyway, here's the water coming again. All right, so you've had Gatsby feeling all nervous, right? He says, "Oh my gosh, it's 2 minutes to 4. Nobody's coming. She's never coming," and he leaves.
That's how I felt on the night we met.
And of course, Daisy
nervous.
shows up, right? And then Gatsby shows up. Well, what's the purpose of him being soaking wet?
He's sweating.
No,
he's not. I don't
soaking
know.
wet. It's raining.
It's
What
raining.
does water represent? Come on, everybody.
Rebirth,
Right?
cleansing.
For sure. Okay, so he's been reborn because of the water. Now, if you
I
remember,
thought he was so nervous he was sweating in a pool of
if you
sweat.
remember, he meets
gross.
Dan Cody and creates Jay Gatsby in the water. Because, of course, he saves Dan Cody from crashing into the rocks. So he's on a boat. He saves him in the water. He is born at that point.
The baptism
Right.
of
Jay Gatsby, moving from James Gatz to Jay Gatsby. Okay? We see the same thing here. So,
Man.
again, water, right?
Deep stuff, man.
Yeah. Oh, my gosh. This
Who was this
tablet.
guy?
This is Jack's tablet. All right.
No, I mean the guy who thought about all this stuff.
Yeah,
He's
it was
smart.
pretty good, eh? Yeah. All right. Oh, I like this one too. Luckily, the clock took this moment to tilt dangerously at the pressure of his head, whereupon he turned and caught it with trembling fingers and set it back in place. All right. It's a defunct clock. It's a mantelpiece clock. It doesn't tell time. And this ties back to what
Defunct?
you were saying. What's that?
Defunct?
Yeah. Fitzgerald calls it a defunct
What
clock.
does that mean?
What's that? Not working?
Oh, broken.
Yeah, broken. Okay. So if you've got Gatsby saying you can repeat the past, but time is broken, I want you to notice, especially in chapter 5, how many times time is mentioned. And that idea of he wants to go back. Remember, he
Tick-tock.
wants to go back 5 years. He wants to go back to the moment he met Daisy. Right? He wants to forget that those 5 years ever happened. And so again, he's knocking the clock off the mantle. He's so nervous that he knocks the clock off. And that idea of time being destroyed is repeated all the way through. Any comments on that one?
No.
No.
Move on.
All right.
I gotta.
Oh, this
Cut
one
some
always
wood today.
confuses me. And for those of you who know Miss Dorfling, she and I have often talked about this quotation. "They're such beautiful shirts," she sobbed, her voice muffled in the thick folds. "It makes me sad because I've never seen such beautiful shirts before."
How's Miss Dorfling doing? Like her a lot. She's a really terrific.
She's good.
teacher.
She's in phys ed this semester, so I miss her. Yes.
Getting healthy.
Yeah, absolutely.
Really good.
Absolutely. All right. So what do you do? She's
Dorfer.
crying about. Nobody ever calls her the Dorfer
Oh.
except you.
Okay.
Anyway, she's crying about these shirts. Remember, Gatsby's throwing all of these shirts, and they're all coming down. And he talks about the fact he has somebody in London who sends him all of these shirts every season. Why is she crying?
He's
about
trying
those
to
shirts?
impress her.
Of course. But why
and
is she crying?
she's I think that there's a recognition there that although she feels she loves Gatsby, that she can't dabble in that world.
But she does dabble. This is the
She
first
does
time
dabble,
they're-
but she recognized. I don't know.
It's a really, I have to say, it's a really difficult one because
If you're OCD, this bothers you
Oh
a
my
lot
God.
because there's shirts going everywhere. They're flying all over the place. They're not folded anymore. Maybe she was OCD, and
okay,
and
we don't joke about somebody.
That's
we
not
don't.
funny.
No, we don't.
No, but I'm saying maybe it was
No.
upsetting for her to see all those shirts flying, or maybe I don't know.
Anyway, I think I'm jaded in my opinion of Daisy, and I just don't believe that she is sad because she's lost these years with Gatsby. I don't believe that she loves him enough. She says she does in chapter 7, but I don't think she ever does.
Well,
And
is
so-
she capable of love?
Right.
She's so
I don't think
empty
she is.
and vapid, and there's nothing there of substance that she's not capable of love.
Right. I don't think so. And I think it's this, perhaps she's reflecting on a lost moment, but I don't know. That's giving her way
What
too
does
much
Mrs.
credit.
Dorfling say?
Well, we've often talked about it. We don't know. We
Okay.
can't figure out why
Figure out why.
she does that, right? Possibly it has occurred to him that the colossal significance of that light had now vanished forever.
Uh-oh.
Now it was again a green light on a dock.
All the possibility wiped out.
Well, but this is still only in chapter 5. They've just been reunited.
Mhm.
But I think finally Daisy's become real. That maybe it wasn't just Daisy. Have you ever heard the expression that you're in love with the idea of being in love? So you might not actually love somebody, but you love that concept of being with them, even though you know they may not be the right person. I think Gatsby was not in love necessarily with Daisy,
in love
but
with
what
the
she
idea,
represented,
represented.
right? He was in love with that idea of love. I don't know. And so I
and-
think
and-
now she becomes human to him.
That's right.
Sorry.
Yeah, same,
Yeah.
right? So yeah, can't say it any better than you did.
And then this one ties in as well, right? There must have been moments, even that afternoon, when Daisy tumbled short of his dreams, not through her own fault, because of the colossal vitality of his illusion.
Illusion, not
Right.
allusion.
Illusion.
Illusion.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so what he built up in his mind it was not possible.
Right. This is
He
the
idealizes her.
Yeah.
He imagines her to be the perfect woman.
the failure of the American dream.
Right.
Right? It starts there.
It does. It starts there. And we all do this on occasion where we imagine something will be, and we build it up, and
Yep.
then
And then
it's not as good as we had imagined.
That's right.
And implicit in that is that there's a disappointment
right.
in that whole build up, but also
Yeah, absolutely. Here's the one I'd mentioned, referenced earlier. The truth was that Jay Gatsby of West Egg, Long Island, sprang from his platonic conception of himself. Right? Remember, he's a creation. And so again, if we think about this role as a Christ figure, he is created. He is not born of regular means. He is a creation. He is, hold on a second. The Platonic. I keep losing this.
Yeah.
The Platonic
Throw it in the
conception
water.
of himself. Right.
crappy tablet. It's a Huawei.
Anyway, so we touched on that. Moreover, he told it to me a time of confusion when I had reached the point of believing everything and nothing about him. Again, there's so many stories, there's so many things, and finally in chapter 6 he finally tells Nick the whole story, right, of his parents, of where they were dirt poor farmers, that he wanted to have nothing to do with them. And we actually meet Mr. Gatz at the end,
And he was driven, right? Remember, he makes his lists
Right,
in the
he
morning.
makes his
and
lists.
He's getting his agenda ready. And,
That's right.
And he's marking things down and setting those goals, just like you guys should be doing. But
right,
yeah, set your goals.
maybe not quite to the extent
Be
that
cool,
Gatsby
stay
did.
in school.
And remember, though, Henry Gatz
Except
is
during
impressed with his son's success. Right? He's really, when he sees everything, he's more impressed with that than he's upset about his son's death. I'm going to fix everything just the way it was before, he said, nodding determinedly. She'll see. So again, this is Gatsby wanting to go back, wanting to to not have Tom as part of his of their lives, and he's going to make it just the way it was. And of course, Nick says you can't repeat
Right,
the past.
and of course, how arrogant of Gatsby to imagine that he's going to infiltrate and just simply, because he's shown up,
Right.
he says to Tom, "She never loved you. She always
Right.
loved me." And to insinuate himself into that life and imagining, because of his idealistic approach, that he just thinks he could just walk right in
and take it.
take it all.
And Tom's not going to let that happen.
Negative.
No. Out of the corner of his eye, Gatsby saw that the blocks of the sidewalks really formed a ladder and mounted to a secret place above the trees. He could climb to it if he climbed alone, and once there, he could suck on the pap of life, gulp down the comparable milk of wonder. Again, that idea of climbing the social ladder, of moving up. Right. This is when he's in Louisville and he meets Daisy. He sees that possibility ahead of him, that if he can climb and he can climb alone, he could do it. Right. He could have her. Sorry. Did you want to add to that? Again, we're going through this. It was a rich. Oh, this is the
Like
car.
we're on what, 10?
This is 19. We're
19,
doing all right.
and we got 32.
32.
Oh, come on, let's pick it up.
It was a rich cream color, bright with nickel, swollen here and there in its monstrous length, with triumphant hat boxes and supper boxes and tool boxes, and terraced with a labyrinth of windshields that mirrored a dozen suns. Sitting down behind many layers of glass in a sort of green leather conservatory, we started to town. The car.
Described as a room.
Right.
It's crazy.
Massive.
It's a massive car.
Right. Interesting thing is that here it's described as cream, and yet we always associate his car as being yellow, which I think is interesting, because at the end, when somebody says, about the car, and he says, yeah, it was a big yellow car. So we've gone from cream to yellow. We've already talked about cream as being not white. We've got this green interior. Think about our green light, go for it, wealth, go forward. And then if we have a cream car, it's not white, it's not good. And of course, it's not something that Tom would ever drive. Tom has a
Tom
blue
refers
car.
to it as a circus wagon.
That's right. That's
right?
right. Absolutely. Absolutely.
And
So-
it's I maybe not to offend anybody, but in the early 2000s, and that people would drive what were called Hummers. I think they're still around.
Oh yeah.
And you'd see these massive military vehicles
On the streets of
on the
Mississauga.
streets of Mississauga, and you would say, and
Sorry if anybody has a Hummer.
sorry about that. But it just, I would laugh every time I would see one, because I'm thinking, and they were very expensive.
Right.
So it's an ostentatious show of wealth, but the funny thing is that rich people didn't drive them.
Well, do you remember? I don't know if anybody's been watching Ozark, but in the episode with Sue, she's been bought off, the therapist, right? And she buys, what was it, a
McLaren.
A McLaren,
That's
right?
right.
And this woman who's, I don't know, in her mid 60s,
Very
driving this
car.
conspicuous car. You know, she's been paid off. Anyway, look here, old sport. He broke out surprisingly. What's your opinion of me, anyhow? Again, Gatsby is so consumed with what people think of him.
Enough about you, or enough about me. What do
What
you
think about
me?
Exactly, exactly.
I think you said that on our first date.
Ah. Here's another thing I always carry, a souvenir of Oxford days. It was taken in Trinity Quad. The man on my left is now the Earl of Doncaster. Name dropping,
Climbing.
right? Climbing. I've actually, I've worked at Oxford for 3 years or so I can do the name dropping. Yes, I was in, this college and that college. Anyway, it's a beautiful, beautiful town, and the colleges are beautiful. And Trinity is one of the colleges you can't get into very easily because it's one of the oldest and one of the most exclusive colleges. And it's huge money. And what they talk about a quad is sort of a big open grass area with the 4 buildings around it. And so that's the quad.
At Mac, we used to have quad parties during Frosh Week. I don't think they do that anymore.
Probably not. Yeah,
it's a lot
I
of
think
fun.
that was a long time ago too.
And it was
Sorry, man. Just tell it like I see it. Oh, it's nothing underhand, he assured me. Miss Baker's a great sportswoman, you know, and she'd never do anything that wasn't all right. Again, this is Gatsby. Of course, she's a cheater, right?
cheater.
She cheats.
She cheats.
So, yeah. So, again, it's
but in
it's
Gatsby's world,
eyes.
right? It's not really cheating.
Right. It's sort of cheating.
Remember what that kid said during the commencement speech? It ain't cheating if you don't get
caught.
Oh, terrible. That was the worst ever.
Meyer Wolfsheim, no, he's a gambler. Gatsby hesitated, then added coolly, he's the man who fixed the World Series back in 1919. So again, we've got that, the criminal element. And Meyer Wolfsheim always talks about the metropole, right? And how he has all these memories of all these people.
Wind's picking up.
What's that? The wind is picking up. All right. They moved with a fast crowd, all of them young and rich and wild. But she came out with an absolutely perfect reputation.
Kardashians.
Perhaps because she doesn't drink. It's a great advantage not to drink among hard drinking people. This could be taken from the Fitzgerald's lives. Like, exactly, right? But they did
party,
drink.
drinking,
The
fast
Lost
crowd.
Generation.
Yeah.
Lost Generation for
Just-
sure.
Yeah, like the Kardashians.
Talking about Daisy in that one.
I
all
wouldn't
right?
know a Kardashian if they were sitting beside me.
I wouldn't either. No. But
Probably wouldn't like them though.
I love this one. I keep it always full of interesting people, night and day, people who do interesting things, celebrated people. Well, of course, he's talking about the parties and his house, right? Klipspringer, oh my gosh, yeah. He's the one who can play the piano, right? And he, of
Tickle
course,
the ivories.
at the end where Nick is trying to get him to come to the funeral, he's forgotten his sneakers. He really needs his sneakers, but of course isn't coming to the funeral.
Yeah, it's
right?
this idea again of perpetuating this idea that I am popular, I am the in crowd, and he wants to surround himself with people so that it elevates his own status as well.
And I do have to correct something. I apologize. Some of these are out of order once I got to a certain point when I collected them. After his embarrassment and his unreasoning joy, he was consumed with wonder at her presence. He had been full of the idea so long, dreamed it right through to the end, waited with his teeth set, so to speak, at an inconceivable pitch of intensity. Again, this is his dream of impressing Daisy. He'd waited and waited and waited, and finally it had come true. But as we've already talked about, that gets dashed pretty darn quickly.
All for naught.
He had changed it at the age of 17, and at the specific moment that witnessed the beginning of his career when he saw when he saw Dan Cody's yacht drop over the most insidious flat on Lake Superior. Talked about this, right? This is Jay Gatsby creating himself on the water, etc. All right. I'm trying to find, the numbers have gotten a little bit weird here, but I knew I had discovered a man of fine breeding after I talked with him an hour. Of course, this is Meyer Wolfsheim talking about Gatsby. There is no fine breeding there, right? If you know, right, Gatsby brings Meyer to try to put in Nick's mind at rest that he's a good man.
That's right.
But he's having a criminal do that. So
it almost feels Donald Trumpish.
oh, stop with the Donald Trump.
What?
All right. Benny McClanahan always arrived with 4 girls. They were never quite the same ones in physical person, but they were so identical with one another that it inevitably seemed they had been there before.
cookie cutter.
Right.
Same, right?
Nobody the
It's
same.
just-
Remember Mr. Mumble?
Mr. Mumble.
Mumble, right?
Nobody's different. Everybody is exactly the same.
That's right.
And not noteworthy at all.
I thought it was interesting. Again, going back to Maureen Corrigan, her name is listed at the beginning of chapter 4. The Corrigans, right? He lists all these people. Some of them are real, just so you know, and then some of them are fictitious. Again, that real, fake. We could look at that.
Moving on. Let's go. Come on.
I'm almost done. Oh gosh, I actually have. It looks like I have 30.
It's waiting.
I think he half expected to wander into one of his parties some night, went on Jordan, but she never did. Again, reasons for the parties.
But she doesn't travel in that
Of
circle.
course not.
They are the ultra rich. They're not the kind of middle rich kind of people who are out partying and doing this stuff. No, she sits around all day and they think about things that, well, they don't think about anything.
Right.
They just sit there and be rich.
That's right. Right? Or think about the longest day and then forget it, right? Nobody's coming to tea. It's too late. It ties back with my time. And then at 34, the exhilarating ripple of her voice was a wild tonic in the rain. Daisy's voice is all-consuming to Gatsby, right? It's something he thinks about, and it's the importance. And we talked about this already with the sirens, right? Is there anything you wanted to add? I think we did sort of a
machine
quick
gun
job.
approach.
I know. Remember that we are going to be posting your essay shortly. We'll give you probably about a week to do that. It will be a comparative essay, most likely with a poem of our choosing. I will try to give you some choice as well. And
let me compare thee to a summer's day.
Shall I compare thee to a summer's day?
Yeah, whatever. Don't be all.
Are you trying to be romantic?
No.
Anyway, all right, ladies and gentlemen, again, hope you enjoyed, and we will talk to you soon. Take care.
Peace out. Toodles. Word up. Word to your mama.